Welcome all my fellow Washington brethren and sisters. I am your man and resident Washington football fan, Lou. Thank you for joining me here on the Washington Football Report. Training camp coverage continued here on the LouieTeeNetwork. A lot of things to talk about as far as this football team, what's going on in camp, what's going on with the roster. And so let's start with the roster first before we get into the particulars of the actual action on the field. And so yesterday, the Washington football team released tight end Thaddeus Moss. This was a guy we were really excited about coming into this offseason. After him going undrafted, Washington moved quickly, was able to sign him as a UDFA, or as they like to call them, what do they call them? They call them priority free agents, PFAs. And they were the first one to call. We actually had a video where we talked about Thaddeus Moss and had a little bit of his audio from his interview talking about how he was motivated and how he's going to come out and prove himself and how he was disappointed that he wasn't drafted, felt like he was slighted. And so we were all excited about the potential of this guy coming in, not only making this football team. We all assumed he was going to make this football team, but actually going out and thriving in this offensive scheme. Well, that has never really had a chance to happen at all. This is a guy that hasn't really bounced back from the foot injury. And as a matter of fact, they just simply got tired of seeing this image from him on the sidelines. And you hear from some of the beat reporters that the tight end coach really wasn't too enthused by Moss just never really being available. This was the scene too often at practice with Thaddeus Moss, a guy that just too often was on the side watching. That foot injury that he sustained through his senior year at LSU, never really fully recovered from the surgery quite yet, and hasn't been on the field enough to make an impact in that tight end competition that they're having, and thus they decided to part ways with him. And we talked about this on the live stream. Someone brought up in a comment section that the team brought in 5 offensive linemen and they were looking to sign some guys. And we talked about all of the injuries up front and some of the guys not being out there every day and needing more bodies along the offensive line. They brought in 5 guys, ultimately signed 2 of them, one being an ex-first round pick by the San Francisco 49ers in Joshua Garnett. So he's going to come in and try to help along the interior of the offensive line. But in order to bring a couple of bodies in, you have to move on from some guys to create the space to allow you to sign those other players. And so Thad Moss was one of the guys on the chopping block. They essentially released him with an injury designation. So this is the situation. They may ultimately want him back. And so we may not have seen the last of Thaddeus Moss as a Washington football team member. However, he will be subjected to waivers. And if he is able to pass through waivers, which I think it's a pretty safe bet that he could pass through waivers, because, again, this is a guy that didn't get drafted. So him not being able to show anything to this point, I don't think any team is going to be salivating over the prospects of getting their hands on Thaddeus Moss. So if he were to clear waivers, no one picks him up, no one puts in a waiver claim for him, he could easily be back here in Washington on IR, and then you go from there, and maybe he'll be able to help this team down the road. But as of right now, he is not a member of this football team. And a lot of that also had to do not just with his injury situation and not being able to perform, and at this point being dead weight, but also the emergence of Marcus Ball. And I talked about him on the live stream on Thursday night and how he was a guy that Rivera started to mention, and a guy that shout out to Mr. Laughing My Head Off, because he was the guy 2 months ago that brought up Marcus Ball and said, hey, don't sleep on this guy. He was with Ron and company in Carolina. This is a guy that they really like. They have been developing him for the last year and a half. So don't sleep on Marcus Ball. He's a big kid, 6'5", 250, played at Ohio State. Again, you get to Ohio State, you play at that kind of level of college football, you've got to have some level of talent. And so Mr. Laughing My Head Off was ahead of that train. And this is a guy now that is getting reps with the first team. We talked about that on Thursday night. And it's a lot to do with his emergence as well at the tight end position that allowed a guy like Thaddeus Moss to be expendable. So they moved on from him, signed Joshua Garnett. He was one among two guys that they signed along the offensive line to give them a little bit more depth along that offensive line for camp purposes. As we now get to Rivera, we all know about the cancer situation in the form of skin cancer that head coach Ron Rivera has. Nothing has changed. It's still Ron's plan. And I'm going to attack it and approach it as such because Ron is attacking and approaching it as such. I said this a million times that this is the right man for the job at the right time. And the thing I love about Ron, and I've said this all offseason, is that in the face of adversity, this guy just doesn't blink. Here's another adversity thrown in his direction, another bit of adversity thrown his way, probably the biggest challenge of his life. And the guy hasn't flinched. He hasn't blinked. He said, look, I'm going to be at work as much as I can be at work. I'm hoping to not have to enact plan B, but if I'm not up to it, and he says, look, I'm no fool. I understand that there are going to be times where I'm not going to feel up to it because of whatever route they go, whether it's chemo or some kind of radiation therapy, whatever the case may be. Because of that, he's going to not have the type of energy that he needs to be able to give to his team. And so he says, look, there are going to be days, I'm not a fool, I understand this, but I'm going to try to push through. But there are going to be days where I'm just not feeling up to it, and we'll enact plan B. And he was speaking about this after practice today. And he said plan B is essentially what we've already laid out, which is if I can't go, if I can't be available, Jack Del Rio. And I told you this. I surmised this. We drew an inference on Thursday night when the news first broke. We didn't know this for sure, but it just made sense. Again, you're talking about Jack Del Rio, a guy that is a veteran coach that's been a head coach multiple times over, whether you're talking Jacksonville or you're talking Oakland, and has been an assistant in this league for a very long time. This is a guy that knows the ropes. He's been an interim head coach before in Denver. So this is a guy that is not a stranger to this. So that was the easy, logical decision. And if Rivera can't be there, the guy that would then assume the role of head coach is Jack Del Rio. And Rivera kind of reiterated that as plan B. If he can't be there, Del Rio would step in and take over and nothing would change. So they have a plan in place when he can't be there. He seems like a guy that's upbeat, understands the task at hand, and he's looking to tackle this thing, beat it into submission, and keep it moving. And so, as we've said a million times, I'm going to continue to say, Rivera's strong. We're praying for him and his family, and we are going to get through this together because we're a family, and this is what we do. So, looking forward to Rivera continuing to coach this football team. Speaking of coaching his team, he was hard on them at practice today because they did not finish practice the way that he wanted them to. He said, look, for three-fourths of practice, we were strong. For three-fourths of practice, we were getting after it. And then the latter half of practice, that last quarter of practice, we started to slag and lag off. And I couldn't allow that. And he dug into them at the end of practice, told them that that was unacceptable. He said, look, this is a 3-hour marathon, are these NFL games. So you can't, in the fourth quarter, decide now you're going to be out of juice. That's when you got to come and bring it when it's winning time the most. And so he got after him about practice and the tempo. And we talked about tempo. Rivera's talked about tempo a ton, how he wants an up-tempo practice because he wants to simulate the game and everything is at full speed during the game. So that's what he wants at practice. He did not get that at the very end of practice today. He said they got to about the 2-hour 10 mark of practice and they started to kind of tail off a bit. And so he let them know that was unacceptable. If you want to play Super Bowl winning football, that's not how you do it. And so he got into them. He also ripped into guys. And this was an overall message to the team, especially the guys competing for not only a roster spot, but a starting spot on this team. You're getting opportunities here. It's a young football team. We talked about that Thursday night. It's a young team. You're going to get opportunities. And he said, look, Thomas Davis and Adrian Peterson are veterans that know how to work. All right. Follow these types of guys and what they do. All right. He said, Wes Martin, you're getting that. He singled out Wes Martin. He said, you're getting an opportunity. You need to take this opportunity and make the most of it. So I don't know if that's a shot at West, as he's not doing enough to solidify that left guard position. At the end of the day, I think Wes Martin's going to solidify that position, but they brought in Joshua Garnett, and I'm not saying that he's the guy that you want starting. Obviously, he was available at this time of the year for a reason, and so that's not why they brought him in here to take over and have a chance to start, but they brought him in for a reason. More bodies up front, interior, so Wes Martin has to step his game up. I still believe in Wes Martin, still believe that he's going to be our starting left guard. But remember, he wasn't sharp last year at left guard. When we saw the best of Wes Martin last year, it was at right guard. And that shouldn't make that big of a difference, but sometimes it does. But this is a guy that played left guard at Indiana, so that's no excuse. Look for Wes Martin to tighten up. Hopefully he answers the bell of that challenge being called out in front of the team and responds in the fashion that we need him to do, because we need Wes Martin to be our starting left guard. I do not want to see Wes Schweitzer in that role. Wes Schweitzer, to me, was brought here to be depth and a backup at left guard, not a starting guard on this football team. So hopefully Wes Martin stands up and takes on the challenge that was issued by head coach Ron Rivera. So now we get to the actual on the field portion of practice today and things that have been going on of note recently. Let's start with the offensive side of the football. Continues to lag behind and struggle. They are a bit behind the defense. The defense had another strong day at camp and at practice today. Every single one of the quarterbacks that are going to make this football team, Dwayne Haskins, Kyle Allen, and Alex Smith, all threw interceptions at some point today, whether you're talking red zone, 9-on-9, or 11-on-11. Kyle Allen threw 2 interceptions today, and he's really struggled by all accounts thus far in camp, despite the guy knowing the most out of the quarterback group of the playbook. He seems to be the guy, and this was something he struggled with last year, decision-making, making mistakes, turning the football over. This is something that he's done to this point in training camp as well. A lot of interceptions that I've seen, a lot of interceptions that I've heard have come from number 8 in camp. So he's got to tighten up, but he threw 2 more interceptions today. Dwayne threw an interception as well. So did Alex Smith. So no quarterback was clean on this day, and they continue to have their issues up front. They've got to be better as a collective unit, and they'll continue to get better. And I told you, it's a process. Look for the offense to be behind the defense when this season gets underway. I fully expect that. I've been telling you guys as much, and nothing has changed my mind to this point. I expect the offense to potentially get off to a slow start. And if we're in ball games, it will be because of the defense. But make no mistake about it, this offense will eventually get where they want to be. They're still figuring out who is who, what guys are going to make up the 53-man roster. Again, the offense, to me, is the biggest question mark on this football team. Special teams is pretty much locked up. Same can be said for much of the defense. They still have some positions they're playing around with on defense. We'll get to the defensive side of the football here in a second, but a lot of positions are up for grabs. We still got question marks along the offensive line. We still got question marks at tight end. We still got question marks at wide receiver. A lot of question marks at wide receiver all of a sudden. So the offense is a big time work in progress. A lot of moving parts, as I've talked about plenty of times. That's the biggest problem here, is that it's a lot of moving parts. One of the guys that we know are going to make the roster, he just got here literally a week and a half ago, in Dontrell Inman. I mean, there are so many moving parts here. And again, they just put on the pad, so everything's new. New offensive coordinator, essentially for all intents and purposes, a new quarterback, and a bunch of new parts around him. So it's going to take time to mesh and gel together, more so on the offensive side than on the defensive side. The defensive side of football is more about communication, and if you can get that going, you can just get different guys out there. If the communication is strong, you'll be able to get it done, because as I've mentioned, defense isn't that hard. You know, there are different ways to run cover 3 and cover 2 and cover 4, but there aren't but so many ways to do it. You know what I mean? There are exotic blitzes and things that you can do. Guys can be really good in zone coverage, do a great job of pattern matching, things of that nature, but defense isn't that hard. You know, offense is a lot harder. It's a lot more complex. So there's an explanation for this. And again, it's going to take some time offensively, but they're definitely behind the defense. Rivera talked about the defense. Speaking of the defense, they were really good again today. He mentioned that after practice in his presser. He said, look, the defense was strong. We need the entire team to be strong, however. And so, again, Greg Stroman continues to shine in camp, made another interception today. Jimmy Moreland, the people's corner, stepped up with a couple of picks today. And so this is a theme that we've seen from these quarterbacks turning the football over. But the secondary, they're creating these opportunities. And so another strong day by the defense. Guys are stepping up in that secondary. We're starting to hear some names of guys that are looking to solidify a roster spot because I told you, we need to wipe the slate clean on some guys. I know I was guilty of this. I can't speak for any of you. I had started to throw dirt on Greg Stroman's NFL career here in Washington. Maybe he would have gotten an opportunity elsewhere, but I was starting to throw dirt on Greg Stroman after last season. So for him to come back stronger this year and seem to be a guy more confident, I'm excited for him. Saw some pictures of him dapping up the coach, and chest bumping with Chris Harris, the DB coach, after a pick in red zone drills. So Stroman has been outstanding in camp to this point, making a ton of plays. Jimmy Moreland got involved in that action today with a couple of interceptions. So again, the secondary starting to step up. And no Chase Young at practice again. Even though he was out in full garb, he did not participate. They're going to take it slow with him again. I have no problems with that. If he needs an entire week and a half off, if he needs 2 weeks off, I could care less. This guy will be ready to go when we step out on the field September 13th. That's all I care about. It reminds me a lot of Nick Bosa last year. He missed a lot of camp with an injury. And when week one hit, he was ready to go right out of the gate and did not look back. And so I could see a lot of the same things happening with Chase Young. I know what this guy is capable of. I just want him healthy. So no Chase Young at practice again today in terms of him participating, but he was out on the field. So at the end of the day, a lot of things going well for the defense, not so much for the offense. That's a work in progress. They'll continue to work. And Rivera made it a point of emphasis to say, look, the thing that we like about our quarterbacks right now is they're making the right decisions. Now it's just about the fundamentals, footwork, and how quickly are you going through your progressions and things of that nature, follow through on the football, where's your back leg? All of these things they could continue to tweak and get right with these guys. But as long as they're making the right decisions, maybe they're not letting the football go. Maybe they're not trusting where their landmark is and where they're supposed to put the football. Maybe the receivers aren't running proper depths. In the case of a Dwayne Haskins interception, I can tell you, receiver went one way, Dwayne threw it another, ball is intercepted. That's a miscommunication between the receiver and the quarterback. And that's why you need this to happen in practice so you can figure out what went wrong, who was at fault, and get on the same page. And so you don't want these things to take place during the course of the game and during the season. You need that to happen in practice. Iron out those wrinkles now so that when the real game takes place, you don't have these kinds of mishaps. So like I said, these are the types of things you want to happen in practice so that you get better. And so hopefully the offense continues to get stronger. They start to really define roles for some of these guys, figure out who's who and where are they best utilized. And then they'll start to be able to have some continuity and a little bit of rhythm and flow moving forward. So that's your training camp coverage for today. Remember, we'll be doing this periodically when I feel the need to come out with some coverage, and I'll try to do this as often as I can. But in the meantime, you guys stay safe. Remember, I am a Washington fan etched in burgundy and gold. My Washington spirit will never die. Washington spirit will never fold. Until we meet again, hail to our beloved Washington football team. Until next time, you guys stay safe. Make sure that you like this video. Subscribe to the LouieTeeNetwork if you haven't already done so. Make sure that you also turn on that notification bell so you don't miss a thing. With that being said, you guys take it easy. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. NBA basketball, whatever you're watching, baseball. Have a good weekend, and we'll reconvene sooner rather than later. You guys take care.